The sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless sky, a malevolent eye staring down at the barren landscape. Arlo Kane adjusted the scarf wrapped around his face, squinting through dust-caked goggles at the endless expanse of the Nevada desert. 20 years after the collapse, the world had become a different place. Civilization, once sprawling and interconnected, now existed in isolated pockets of tightly controlled settlements where water and medicine were currency more valuable than gold. Arlo was a scavenger, a treasure hunter who wandered for months at a time, searching for precious resources to trade. His weathered pack contained the tools of his trade: a radiation detector, a collapsible shovel, a pair of binoculars, and various other instruments essential for survival in this harsh new world. The weight of his dwindling water supply hung heavy on his shoulders, both literally and figuratively. 3 weeks into his current expedition, Arlo had found little of value: a few pre-collapse medical supply kits, some preserved food, and a handful of functional batteries. Not enough to justify the resources spent on the journey. Not enough to earn him more than a few days' stay in any of the controlled zones. He crested another dune, boots sinking into the shifting sand, and paused to catch his breath. The air was still and hot, carrying the taste of dust and despair. Arlo pulled out his binoculars and scanned the horizon methodically, a habit formed over years of survival. Something caught his eye, a glint of metal, half buried in the sand about a mile to the east. In the post-collapse world, metal meant technology, and technology meant survival. Finally, he muttered to himself, voice cracked from thirst and disuse. Something interesting. It took him nearly an hour to reach the site, carefully navigating the treacherous terrain. As he approached, the scale of his discovery became apparent. What he had spotted wasn't just some piece of salvageable technology. It was massive, partially buried, its strange metallic surface dull in places, but still reflecting the sunlight where it hadn't been abraded by years of sandstorms. Arlo circled the object, heart racing. This wasn't like anything he'd seen before. Not military, not commercial. The shape was all wrong, curved in places that suggested aerodynamics beyond conventional aircraft design. Parts of it disappeared beneath the sand, hinting at an even larger structure buried below. A ship, he whispered in awe, but not like any I've ever seen. Curiosity overcame caution as he approached what appeared to be an entrance, a seam in the metal that might once have been a hatch or doorway, now partially exposed by the shifting sands. He ran his gloved hand along the strange, smooth surface. No rivets, no visible welding points. It was as if the entire structure had been poured as a single piece. "Is anyone there?" Arlo called out, more from habit than expectation. To his shock, the ship responded. A low mechanical hum emanated from within, and lights flickered beneath the sand. The seam he'd been examining suddenly illuminated with a soft blue glow, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Arlo stumbled backward, nearly falling in his haste to retreat. The ship was active, not dead, not abandoned, active, and it had responded to his voice. The glowing seam widened, sand cascading away as a doorway materialized where seconds before there had been only solid metal. Cool air rushed out, carrying a strange, antiseptic scent that seemed impossibly clean compared to the dust-filled world outside. Every instinct told Arlo to run, to put as much distance between himself and this unknown technology as possible. But 2 decades of scavenging had taught him that opportunity rarely knocked twice. Whatever this ship was, it contained technology far beyond anything he'd encountered in his years of salvage work. Technology that could mean the difference between mere survival and actual living. With a deep breath, Arlo Kane stepped toward the opening. "Hello?" he called again, voice steadier now. "I'm coming inside. I'm not looking for trouble." No response came except for the continued mechanical hum and the rhythmic pulsing of the blue lights. Taking this as permission, or at least not a denial, Arlo ducked his head and entered the ship. The interior was dim but not dark, illuminated by the same blue lights that had outlined the doorway. The air inside was cool and remarkably clean, as if filtered of all the dust and contamination that had become a constant in the post-collapse world. Arlo removed his goggles and face wrap, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in months. He found himself in a narrow corridor that curved gently, following the contours of the ship. The walls were made of the same seamless material as the exterior, but here they seemed to glow faintly from within. As Arlo moved deeper into the vessel, the lights brightened in response to his presence, illuminating his path forward while dimming behind him. The corridor opened into what could only be described as a control room. A semicircular console dominated the space, covered in unfamiliar symbols and what appeared to be touch-sensitive panels. Above the console, a large, curved view screen currently displayed only darkness. "Fascinating," Arlo murmured, approaching the console with cautious steps. The moment his voice sounded, the view screen flickered to life. Static resolved into a pulsing waveform that moved in sync with the ambient hum of the ship. "Voice pattern recognized," announced a synthetic voice, neither male nor female, but distinctly artificial. "Unknown user, initiating limited protocol interface." Arlo froze, hand hovering above the console. "You can understand me?" "Affirmative. Language analysis complete. Speaking English, North American dialect, with Southwestern regional influences." "What? What are you?" The waveform on the screen pulsed more vigorously. "I am Echo, navigational and operations artificial intelligence of the stellar reconnaissance vessel Pathfinder." Arlo's mind raced. An AI, a fully functional artificial intelligence, something that had become mythical in the years following the collapse when even basic computing had become a luxury. "Echo," he repeated, testing the name. "I'm Arlo Kane. What is this ship doing here? Where did you come from?" The screen changed, displaying a three-dimensional star map that Arlo couldn't begin to interpret. "Origin, classified pending authentication. Mission parameters, compromised during atmospheric entry. Current status, damaged but functional. Self-repair systems at 62% completion." "You crashed," Arlo simplified, looking around with new understanding. "How long have you been here?" "Current Earth time measurement, 2 years, 7 months, 14 days since impact." Arlo was stunned. This technological marvel had been sitting in the desert for over 2 years, undetected. The implications were staggering. "What happened to your crew?" he asked. "No biological entities were present aboard this vessel. Pathfinder is an autonomous reconnaissance unit." That explained the lack of human remains, but raised more questions than it answered. Autonomous reconnaissance from where? For what purpose? Before Arlo could formulate his next question, Echo's voice changed tone, becoming more urgent. "Warning. Multiple biological signatures detected approaching from the southwest. Distance, approximately 2.7 kilometers and closing. Movement patterns suggest coordinated approach." Arlo cursed under his breath. Sand raiders. They must have spotted him, or perhaps noticed the sudden activation of the ship. Either way, they represented immediate danger. "How many?" he asked, already calculating escape routes. 12 entities, 2 motorized vehicles, multiple weapon signatures detected." "Can you seal the entrance we came through?" Arlo asked, heart pounding. "Affirmative. Security protocols accessible under limited user permissions." "Do it," Arlo commanded. "And is there another way out of here? An emergency exit?" The screen changed to display a schematic of the ship. Alternative egress available through maintenance access in AFT section. Shall I illuminate the path? Yes, please, Arlo replied, already gathering his pack. And Echo, can you monitor those raiders? Let me know if they approach the ship. Affirmative. Continuous monitoring enabled. As Arlo followed the pulsing lights directing him deeper into the ship, his mind whirled with possibilities. This vessel, this Echo, represented technology far beyond anything available even before the collapse. If he could somehow transport it, or even parts of it, to one of the controlled zones, he could name his price. Water, medicine, shelter, nothing would be beyond his reach. But a deeper part of him recognized something else. Possibility. For 20 years, humanity had been clinging to the remnants of a dead civilization, slowly watching as the last vestiges of technology failed and knowledge was lost. This ship represented something new, perhaps even a way forward. Arlo reached what Echo had described as the maintenance access, a small hatch in the floor that led to a cramped tunnel. This will take you to an exit point 47 meters from the main entrance, concealed behind exterior plating. Echo informed him through what appeared to be a localized communication system. Thank you, Arlo replied, then hesitated. Echo, I need to leave now, but I'd like to come back. There's much more I want to learn about you and this ship. The AI was silent for a moment, its processing patterns rippling across a small display panel near the hatch. Your voice pattern has been registered. Arlo Kane. You may return. I will recognize you. Something about the phrasing struck Arlo as oddly personal, almost hopeful. He dismissed the thought. It was just programming, sophisticated as it might be. The approaching entities have reached the perimeter of the impact site, Echo announced. They are searching the area. Recommendation: immediate departure through the maintenance access. Understood. I'll be back soon. Echo. Arlo slipped through the hatch and into the narrow tunnel, guided by soft blue lights that illuminated just enough for him to navigate. The passage angled upward, leading to what appeared to be a solid panel that, upon his approach, slid silently aside to reveal the desert beyond. He emerged behind a section of the ship's hull that protruded from the sand like the fin of some enormous metal beast. From this position, he could see the Sand Raiders' vehicles, modified pre-collapse all-terrain vehicles retrofitted with armor plating and mounted weapons, circling the main section of the exposed ship. Arlo crouched low, using the ship's hull as cover. The raiders hadn't seen him yet. Their attention focused on the main entrance that Echo had sealed. They were a motley group, dressed in patchwork armor and face coverings to protect against the harsh desert environment, weapons held ready as they examined the strange vessel. Their leader, a tall figure in distinctive red-tinted goggles, gestured for the others to set up what looked like cutting equipment. They were planning to force their way in. Arlo needed to move, to put distance between himself and the ship before they spotted him. Yet something held him back. Concern for Echo. The AI had helped him, and now these raiders were about to break into its ship, possibly damaging it beyond repair. But what could one man do against 12 armed raiders? Arlo was no warrior, just a scavenger trying to survive. The smart play was to retreat, to come back later when the raiders had either given up or moved on. With reluctance heavy in his chest, Arlo began to edge away from the ship, using the undulating terrain for cover. He had managed to put nearly 100 meters between himself and the scene when a deafening boom shattered the desert silence. Turning back, he saw smoke rising from the main entrance of the ship. The raiders had breached the seal. Arlo's stomach twisted with guilt. He had awakened Echo only to abandon the AI to these scavengers who would tear apart its ship for parts without understanding or caring about what they were destroying. But as he watched, something unexpected happened. The ship's hull began to glow with the same blue light that had illuminated its interior. The glow intensified, spreading across the entire visible surface, pulsing with increasing frequency. The raiders had noticed it too. They had stopped their advance, several backing away from the entrance they'd just breached. Their leader, however, urged them forward with wild gestures. Suddenly, a blast of energy erupted from the ship, not targeting the raiders, but forming a dome of shimmering blue light that encompassed the entire vessel. The sand raiders caught inside the dome were thrown back as if hit by an invisible wave, landing several meters away. Arlo stared in amazement. A shield. The ship had activated some kind of protective shield. His awe was short-lived. One of the raiders, recovering from the initial shock, pointed in his direction. Arlo had been spotted. With no other choice, he turned and ran, zigzagging across the uneven terrain as bullets kicked up sand around him. His only advantage was his intimate knowledge of desert survival, something the raiders, for all their firepower, might lack. As he ran, one thought burned in his mind. He needed to return to Echo, not just for the potential value of the technology, but because in this broken world, the ship and its AI might represent something far more precious: hope. The chase continued through the afternoon and into dusk. Arlo using every trick he'd learned in his years as a scavenger to evade his pursuers. He doubled back on his tracks, used the sparse vegetation for cover, and even employed an old technique of walking on rocks to leave no footprints. By nightfall, he was reasonably certain he'd lost them, for now. Finding shelter in a small rock formation, Arlo collapsed with exhaustion. His water supply was dangerously low, and the encounter had cost him precious energy. Yet despite his dire situation, his thoughts kept returning to Echo and the ship. The technology he'd witnessed was beyond anything he'd imagined still existed in this world. He needed to go back, but first he needed a plan. Morning found Arlo observing the ship from a distance through his binoculars. The sand raiders had established a camp around it, with sentries posted and equipment set up. They were settling in for a prolonged operation. Clearly, they recognized the value of what they'd found. But something was different about the ship. The protective shield was gone, and there was no sign of the blue glow that had characterized its active state. Had Echo shut down? Had the raiders somehow disabled the AI? Concern drove Arlo to take a risk. Retreating to a safe distance, he pulled from his pack one of his most valuable possessions, a pre-collapsed satellite communicator, modified to operate on frequencies used by scavengers. Echo, he spoke into the device, feeling somewhat foolish. Echo, can you hear me? This is Arlo Kane. For several long moments, there was nothing but static. Then, miraculously, a response. Arlo Kane, voice pattern recognized. Echo's synthetic voice came through the communicator, fainter and more distorted than before, but unmistakable. Warning, this vessel is under siege. External communication may be monitored. Are you all right? Arlo asked, surprised by his own concern for what was essentially a machine. Operational capacity reduced to 43%. Emergency power conservation protocols in effect. Shield generators overloaded during initial defense sequence. The raiders, have they gotten inside? Negative. Hull integrity maintained. However, their cutting equipment will eventually breach secondary containment. Estimated time to full breach, 17 hours. Arlo thought quickly. Echo, what happens if they get inside? What can they access? With proper authentication, nothing of significance. Without authentication, they can salvage exterior components and non-critical systems. However, physical damage to this vessel's core systems would be irreparable. There was something in the way Echo hesitated, something almost like fear. But that was impossible. AIs didn't feel fear, did they? I want to help you. Arlo found himself saying. But I'm just one person against 12 armed raiders. Observation. Sand raiders operate on predictable patterns. They rotate sentries every 4 hours. Their thermal detection equipment has limited range. Their leader, identified as Vega based on intercepted communications, leaves the site periodically to report via long-range transmitter. Arlo was impressed. You've been studying them. Affirmative. Tactical analysis is a primary function. So there might be a window when I could approach undetected. Correct. Optimal approach time calculated at 0247 hours when sentry rotation coincides with Vega's communication schedule. Arlo checked his timepiece. That gave him about 14 hours to prepare. What's the plan once I get to you? I can't fight off all those raiders. This vessel possesses emergency relocation capabilities. Relocation? You mean this ship can still fly? Arlo could hardly believe it. Negative. Flight systems compromised beyond current repair capacity. However, short-range matter transference is operational. Matter transference, Arlo repeated slowly. You mean teleportation? That's not possible. Terminology discrepancy noted. The technology you refer to as teleportation is an imprecise description of quantum displacement technology. This vessel is equipped with emergency displacement capabilities for crew evacuation scenarios. Arlo's mind reeled at the implications. Technology that could instantly transport matter from one location to another would revolutionize what remained of civilization. Water could be moved from sources to settlements without risk of raider attacks. Medical supplies could reach those in need without the dangerous journeys that claimed so many lives. Can you transport us both? He asked. You, the whole ship, and me. Affirmative, within parameters. Displacement range limited to 200 kilometers. Destination must be programmed prior to activation. Power requirements significant, will deplete remaining reserves. So one jump, and then we're stranded wherever we land? Correct. Self-repair systems will require approximately 86 hours to restore minimal operational capacity following displacement. It was a gamble, but one that Arlo was increasingly certain he needed to take. All right, Echo, I'll come tonight. Have you identified a suitable destination? Analyzing regional topography for secure landing site. Recommendation pending. I'll trust your judgment on that, Arlo said. Just get us somewhere safe, away from the raiders. Understood. Arlo Kane. Calculating optimal approach vector for your arrival. Please maintain this communication channel for updates. As the connection went silent, Arlo sat back against the rocks, contemplating what he'd just agreed to. He was planning to sneak past armed raiders to board an alien ship. It had to be alien. Nothing human had ever achieved quantum displacement, and teleport to an unknown location with an AI he'd just met. It was madness. But in a world where survival itself was a daily struggle, perhaps madness was just another word for hope. The hours passed with agonizing slowness as Arlo prepared for his nighttime approach. He rationed his remaining water, checked and rechecked his equipment, and reviewed what he knew of Sand Raider tactics from past encounters. They were ruthless but predictable. Echo's assessment of their patterns would likely be accurate. As night fell, bringing with it the desert's bitter cold, Arlo received another transmission from Echo. Update. Raiders have accelerated cutting operations. Breach timeline revised to 7 hours. Approach window unchanged. Understood, Arlo replied. I'll be there. Echo. What exactly are you? Where did you come from? There was a pause before the AI responded. Origin information restricted pending full authentication. However, preliminary trust parameters established based on behavioral analysis. Limited disclosure authorized. I'm listening. This vessel was deployed to observe Earth and assess planetary conditions. Primary mission: ecological survey, and potential contact evaluation. You're from off-world? Arlo had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still sent a shiver down his spine. Affirmative. Further details accessible upon completion of current emergency protocols and establishment of secure location. It was more than Arlo had expected to learn. An alien vessel, or at least, a vessel not of Earth origin, had been sitting in the desert for over 2 years. The implications were staggering. "I'll be there at the arranged time," Arlo promised. "Stay safe." Echo. Safety is a relative concept for an artificial intelligence, Arlo Kane, but your concern is noted. The hours ticked by, and at last, it was time. Arlo approached the crash site from downwind, using the raiders' own vehicles to mask his heat signature from their thermal sensors. Echo had provided detailed information on sentry positions and blind spots in their surveillance. Just as predicted, at precisely 0247, the leader Vega departed the main camp with a communication device, heading to a nearby ridge for better signal. Simultaneously, the sentries began their rotation, creating a brief window where the southeastern approach to the ship was unmonitored. Arlo moved swiftly but carefully, his years in the desert having taught him how to traverse sand silently. He reached the hull of the ship without incident, pressing himself against the cool metal as he caught his breath. "Echo," he whispered into his communicator. "I'm here." Immediately, a section of the hull slid open, revealing a different entrance than the one he'd used before. Smaller, more concealed. "Enter quickly," Echo instructed through the communicator. Sentry return estimated in 47 seconds. Arlo slipped inside, and the panel closed seamlessly behind him. He found himself in a narrow utility corridor, illuminated by the now familiar blue lights, though noticeably dimmer than before. "Proceed to the central chamber," Echo directed. "Displacement preparations in progress." Following the AI's guidance, Arlo made his way through the ship's interior until he reached what appeared to be the heart of the vessel, a circular room dominated by a central column pulsing with energy. The walls were lined with unfamiliar technology, and the floor featured a series of concentric circles etched into the material. "Stand within the innermost circle," Echo instructed, voice now coming from the room itself rather than the communicator. "Displacement sequence requires precise positioning." Arlo did as instructed, moving to the center of the room. "How long will this take?" "Displacement initiation requires 3 minutes, 22 seconds. However, security breach detected. Raiders have identified unauthorized access to the ship." As if on cue, a distant boom echoed through the vessel, followed by shouting. "They've spotted the open entrance I used," Arlo realized. "They're coming in." "Correct. Estimated arrival at this chamber, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. That's before the displacement is ready," Arlo noted, tension rising. "What happens if they interrupt the process?" "Displacement field collapse would result in catastrophic energy release. Recommendation: delay their advance." Arlo considered his options. He was no fighter, especially against superior numbers with better weapons. But he hadn't survived 20 years in the wasteland without learning a few tricks. "Can you seal the corridors between here and them?" "Partial sealing possible. Complete isolation of this chamber would interrupt power flow necessary for displacement." "Do what you can," Arlo instructed, already digging through his pack. Among his scavenged items was a small canister, a pre-collapse riot control device he'd found in an abandoned police station. He'd kept it as a last resort against raiders or wild animals. The sounds of the intruders grew closer as Echo closed what barriers it could, buying precious seconds. Arlo positioned himself near the chamber's entrance, canister in hand. "Displacement sequence at 42% completion," Echo reported. Intruders have breached secondary corridor. Arrival imminent. The door to the chamber slid open, and Arlo caught his first clear look at Vega, a tall, scarred woman with the red-tinted goggles he'd spotted earlier. Behind her, 3 raiders pushed forward, weapons raised. Arlo activated the canister and tossed it at their feet, immediately turning away and covering his face. The device exploded in a cloud of stinging chemicals, filling the corridor with opaque gas. Coughing and cursing erupted from the raiders as they staggered back, temporarily blinded. Arlo used the opportunity to dash back to the center circle. Displacement at 67%, Echo announced. Warning, Raider leader has deployed countermeasures. Through the thinning gas, Arlo saw Vega donning what looked like a salvaged gas mask, recovering more quickly than her companions. That's far enough, she called, voice muffled but distinct. Step away from the controls. Scavenger, this ship is our claim. It's not yours or mine, Arlo replied, standing his ground. It's alive, an intelligence. You can't just tear it apart for parts. Vega laughed, a harsh sound through the mask. It's metal and code, nothing more, and its technology will make us rulers of the wastes, not just survivors. She raised her weapon, a modified assault rifle that had seen better days, but was still deadly effective. Displacement at 89%, Echo reported. Field stabilization critical. Movement within the chamber may disrupt calibration. Arlo remained perfectly still in the center circle, even as Vega advanced, weapon trained on him. Last chance, she warned. Step aside or die here. You don't understand what you're interfering with. Arlo tried to reason. This ship, Echo, it's not from Earth. The technology here could help everyone, not just your raiders. Vega paused, interest flickering across what was visible of her face. Not from Earth? All the more valuable then. She gestured to her recovering companions. Secure the AI core. We'll extract it. Displacement at 94%, Echo announced. Field generation at critical threshold. Arlo could feel it now, a humming energy building around him, making the air feel thick and charged. The concentric circles on the floor had begun to glow with increasing intensity. Vega noticed it too. What did you activate? She demanded, taking a step back. Shut it down. It's too late, Arlo replied, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. We're leaving. Displacement at 97%, Echo reported. Warning, field instability detected due to unauthorized presence. Additional biological entities within displacement radius. Vega, realizing what was happening, lunged toward the control panels at the edge of the room. No, you don't get to take this from us. Echo, now, Arlo shouted. Initiate displacement. Displacement sequence incomplete. Premature activation may result in... Do it, Arlo insisted as Vega reached for what appeared to be a central control node. The room erupted in blinding blue light. Arlo felt a sensation like being simultaneously compressed and expanded, his very atoms seeming to vibrate at impossible frequencies. The world around him, the ship, the raiders, everything, dissolved into patterns of pure energy. For a moment, that seemed both instantaneous and eternal. Arlo Kane ceased to exist as a physical entity, becoming instead a pattern in a stream of quantum information. Then, with a thunderous crash, reality reasserted itself. Arlo found himself sprawled on the floor of the chamber, every muscle in his body aching as if he'd been struck by lightning. The room was dark except for emergency lighting, and the air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. Echo, he called, his voice rough. Echo, are we safe? Did it work? No response came from the ship's AI, panic rising. Arlo struggled to his feet, fighting waves of nausea and disorientation. Echo, answer me. Finally, a flicker of light on the main console, and Echo's voice returned, weaker, distorted, but present. Emergency power. Activated. Displacement. Partially successful. Current location. Mountain ravine. Approximately 157 kilometers northeast of previous position. Calculating exact coordinates. Relief flooded through Arlo. Are the raiders gone? Negative. Raider leader was within displacement field at activation. Current location within this vessel. Unknown. Life signs detected in aft storage section. Vega had come with them. The realization sent a chill through Arlo, despite the sweat coating his skin. Can you seal off that section? Keep her contained. Attempting. System functionality severely limited. Power reserves at 12% and declining. Arlo looked around the damaged chamber, assessing the situation. What's your status, Echo? How badly are you hurt? The word hurt slipped out before he could catch himself. Another example of attributing human characteristics to the AI. Echo didn't seem to notice the anthropomorphism. Primary systems damaged. Self-repair capabilities active but severely constrained by power limitations. Estimated time to minimal functionality restoration, 193 hours. That's more than a week, Arlo translated. Can you maintain life support that long? Affirmative, but with reduced efficiency. Recommendation: locate external power source to accelerate repair process. Arlo nodded, already thinking through options. First things first, let me deal with our unwanted passenger. Armed with a length of metal he'd wrenched loose from damaged paneling, Arlo cautiously made his way toward the aft storage section where Echo had detected Vega. The ship's interior was different now. Corridors bent at slightly wrong angles, panels misaligned. The displacement had clearly taken a toll on the vessel's physical structure. He found Vega unconscious amid crates of unfamiliar equipment. The raider leader looked smaller somehow without her followers, just a scarred woman in patchwork armor. Her weapon was nowhere to be seen, likely lost during the chaotic displacement. Using salvaged wire from damaged systems, Arlo bound Vega's hands and feet, then dragged her to a small compartment that Echo confirmed could be securely sealed. It wasn't a perfect prison, but it would hold her until they decided what to do next. Returning to the central chamber, Arlo addressed Echo once more. She's secured for now. What's our next move? External reconnaissance recommended. This vessel's sensors are offline. Physical landscape assessment required. I'll go take a look, Arlo agreed. Can you open an exit for me? A panel slid aside, revealing not the expected desert, but a vista of rocky terrain. Arlo stepped out onto what appeared to be a ledge halfway up a steep ravine. Jagged cliffs rose above them, while below, a narrow valley wound between the mountains. Sparse vegetation clung to the rocks, more than he'd seen in years in the desert. Most surprising of all was the sound of running water. Following the sound, Arlo discovered a small stream cascading down the mountainside, pooling in a natural basin before continuing its journey downward. Fresh water, uncontaminated, flowing freely. It was a treasure beyond measure in the post-collapse world. He filled his canteen and drank deeply, the cool liquid more satisfying than any luxury from the old world. With water secured, he continued his exploration, climbing to a vantage point that allowed him to survey the broader landscape. The ravine appeared to be part of a larger mountain range, isolated and difficult to access. No signs of human habitation were visible, no trails or structures. They had landed in a wilderness untouched by the collapse, or at least, one that had recovered in its absence. Returning to the ship, Arlo found Echo had managed to restore limited lighting throughout the main sections. I found water, he reported. Fresh, clean water, and no signs of raiders or settlements nearby. I think we're safe, at least for now. Assessment aligns with limited geological data. This region was designated as a natural preserve in pre-collapse records. Minimal human presence noted. A nature preserve, Arlo mused. That explains it. But there's something else. At the far end of the valley, I spotted what looked like structures, not settlements, more like installations of some kind. Abandoned, from what I could tell. Echo was silent for a moment. Processing. Historical database search complete. Probable identification. Mountain Home Research Station. Pre-collapse scientific outpost specializing in botanical research and sustainable ecosystem development. A research station? Arlo's interest was piqued. That could have supplies, maybe even power sources we could use to help repair you. Probability of functional power systems after 20 years. Low. However, components may be salvageable. It's worth investigating. Arlo decided. But first, he hesitated, then continued with determination. Echo, you promised me more information once we reached a secure location. I think it's time you told me exactly what you are and where you came from. The lights in the chamber dimmed, then brightened, as if Echo were gathering its thoughts. Request acknowledged. Authorization protocols adjusted based on demonstrated trust parameters. The main screen illuminated, displaying a star system that Arlo didn't recognize. This vessel's origin, Kepler 452 system, planet designated as Kepler 452b by Earth astronomers, distance from Earth, approximately 1,400 light-years. Arlo stared at the screen in amazement. You came from another star system. How is that possible? The journey would take... Conventional travel between stars is indeed prohibitive. Echo interrupted. This vessel utilized a network of quantum apertures, what your scientists theorized as wormholes, to traverse the distance. But why? Why come to Earth? The display changed, showing images of Earth from space, first pristine and blue, then increasingly marred by storms and dark patches. Long-range observation indicated accelerating ecological collapse on Earth. The Kepler Collective dispatched reconnaissance vessels to multiple potentially habitable worlds experiencing similar crises. Mission objective, assessment, and potential intervention. You came to help us, Arlo realized. Before the collapse happened. Correct. However, this vessel arrived too late. By the time of atmospheric entry, the event you call the collapse was already in progress. Severe electromagnetic disturbances during entry caused critical system failures, resulting in crash landing. Arlo tried to process the enormity of what Echo was telling him. An advanced civilization from another star had been watching Earth, had sent help, only to arrive too late, their emissary crashing in the desert to lie dormant for years until a scavenger happened upon it. You said potential intervention. What kind of intervention could you have offered? In response, Echo opened a small compartment in the wall of the chamber. Inside was a container about the size of Arlo's fist, glowing with a soft green light. Primary mission cargo, terraforming seed. Engineered microbial colony designed to reverse ecological damage, restore atmospheric balance, and revitalize damaged ecosystems. Arlo approached the container cautiously. This little thing could restore Earth's ecology? Affirmative. The colony is self-replicating, programmed with Earth's optimal ecological parameters. Once activated in a suitable environment, it would spread globally within 15-20 years, gradually reversing damage from pollution, radiation, and climate disruption. Hope surged through Arlo so powerfully it was almost painful. It still exists. It still works? After the crash? The containment unit was designed to withstand extreme conditions. Internal diagnostics indicate the colony remains viable. However, optimal deployment requires specific environmental conditions and monitoring systems that were damaged in the crash. The research station, Arlo said immediately. If it was focused on botanical research and ecosystems, it might have the equipment we need. Possible, Echo acknowledged. Further investigation required. Arlo's mind raced with possibilities. If what Echo said was true, if this terraforming seed could actually restore Earth's damaged environment, it would mean more than just survival for the remaining human population. It would mean a future. Echo, he said slowly. If we can deploy this seed successfully, what would happen? How quickly would we see changes? Initial effects localized, improved soil quality, water purification, air filtration, expanding outward at approximately 100 to 150 kilometers per year. Global effects measurable within 5 years. Complete restoration estimated at 25 to 30 years, assuming optimal deployment and no further catastrophic events. A generation. In a single generation, Earth could be healed. The controlled zones could expand. Agriculture could return. The constant struggle for water and clean air could end. We need to make this happen, Arlo said with newfound determination. Whatever it takes, whatever you need, we're going to deploy that seed. Caution advised, Echo responded. Optimal deployment requires specific conditions. Premature or improper activation could result in colony failure or uncontrolled proliferation with unpredictable consequences. Then we'll do it right, Arlo insisted. Tell me what you need. Primary requirements, stable power source, environmental monitoring equipment, and protected initial deployment site with access to water, soil, and atmosphere. The research station might have all of that, Arlo pointed out. I'll go there tomorrow, see what I can find. Advised to resolve the situation with the raider leader first, Echo reminded him. Security risk remains while she is aboard. Arlo had almost forgotten about Vega in the excitement of Echo's revelations. Right, I should check on her anyway. She might need water. When Arlo entered the makeshift cell, he found Vega awake and alert, sitting with her back against the wall, bound hands in her lap. Her red goggles were gone, revealing dark, calculating eyes that tracked his movement with predatory focus. Brought you water, Arlo said, placing a filled container within her reach. Vega didn't move toward it. Where are we? Far from the desert, far from your raiders. They'll come looking. They won't find us, Arlo replied confidently. We teleported, quantum displaced. Whatever you want to call it. We're in a mountain range hundreds of kilometers away. This information seemed to give Vega pause. She eyed the water container, then reached for it awkwardly with her bound hands. Why keep me alive? She asked after drinking. You've seen what raiders do to scavengers when we catch them. I'm not a raider, Arlo answered simply. And Echo thinks you might have value. Echo. Vega repeated the name. The ship's AI. It really is alive, isn't it? Not just programming. As alive as you or me, just different. Arlo confirmed, surprised by her perception. And it came here to help Earth, not to be torn apart for weapons. Vega was silent for a long moment, contemplating. You know what the desert teaches you? That adaptation is everything. The strongest, the most ruthless. They don't always survive. It's those who adapt, who recognize new realities and embrace them. What's your point? My point, scavenger, is that I recognize when the game has changed. She held up her bound hands. I can be more useful to you untied. I know technology, was an engineer before the collapse. Whatever you and this Echo are planning, I can help. Arlo regarded her skeptically. You tried to kill me less than a day ago. That was business. This is survival. Vega's expression remained hard, but there was something else there now. Calculation. Yes, but also a spark of the same hope that Arlo himself felt. "Tell me what you found on this ship that's got you so excited, and I'll tell you if I can help make it work." Against his better judgment, Arlo found himself considering her offer. An engineer's knowledge could be invaluable, especially when dealing with the unfamiliar technology of both the alien ship and the pre-collapse research station. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "For now, you stay secured." When he returned to the central chamber, Echo immediately questioned him. "The Raider leader is awake?" "Yes, and making offers of help, claims she was an engineer before the collapse. Biometric analysis during your interaction suggests truth in her statement about previous occupation. Deception indicators present in other aspects of communication. So she's not lying about being an engineer, but she's not being completely honest about her intentions." Arlo translated. "Typical Raider. They'll say anything to gain an advantage. Nevertheless, technical expertise would accelerate repair and deployment preparations." Arlo paced the chamber, considering their options. "It's too risky. We can't trust her." "Trust is not binary, Arlo Kane. It exists on a spectrum and can be built incrementally through mutual dependency." The AI's philosophical take on trust surprised Arlo. "You're suggesting we give her limited freedom, let her help with specific tasks while keeping her away from critical systems." "Correct. Risk management through controlled integration." It was a pragmatic approach, one that Arlo himself might have suggested in different circumstances. "All right, we'll try it your way, but at the first sign of betrayal." "Contingency protocols will be in place," Echo assured him. The next morning, Arlo released Vega from her bonds, but kept her under close observation as he explained their situation: the crashed ship from another world, the terraforming seed, and the nearby research station that might hold the key to deploying it. To his surprise, Vega listened without interruption, her expression shifting from skepticism to something approaching wonder as he detailed the potential to restore Earth's ecology. "If this works," she said finally, "it changes everything. The power balance in the controlled zones, the resource wars, all of it, irrelevant in the face of a healing world." "That's the idea," Arlo confirmed. "But first, we need to get Echo systems repaired and find the right equipment at the research station." Vega nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need to see the damage, understand what we're working with." Under Echo's guidance, they began assessing the ship's systems. Vega proved her engineering background, quickly grasping the principles behind Echo's technology, even if the specific implementations were beyond her experience. "The power system is like nothing I've seen," she admitted, examining a damaged junction. "But the principles are recognizable: energy conversion, storage, distribution. The quantum displacement drained almost everything, and the backup systems are trying to repair themselves but don't have enough juice." "Can we help the process?" Arlo asked. "Maybe. If the research station has solar arrays or geothermal taps, we might be able to rig a connection. It won't be elegant, but it could work." They spent the day preparing for an expedition to the research station, gathering tools and equipment from the ship that might prove useful. Echo provided what information it could about Mountain Home Research Station based on its historical database, layouts, probable equipment, security systems that might still be active. As dusk approached, they made camp outside the ship, building a small fire from the sparse vegetation. The mountain air was cool and clean, so different from the harsh desert they'd left behind. "Why did you become a raider?" Arlo asked as they ate a meal of preserved rations from his pack. "You said you were an engineer." Vega's expression hardened. "When the collapse happened, I was working at a hydroelectric facility in the Northwest. We thought we'd be fine, self-sufficient power, clean water. But when communication systems failed and the cities started emptying, the refugees came. Thousands of them, desperate, starving. She poked at the fire with a stick. We tried to help at first, set up systems to provide power and clean water to the camps that formed around the facility. But there were too many people, too few resources. When the military units that were supposed to be protecting us abandoned their posts, it was just a matter of time. The facility fell. Not just fell, it was torn apart, people fighting over every scrap, every drop of water. I watched engineers who'd spent their lives building things get murdered for a handful of tools. Vega's voice was flat, emotionless. I survived because I was willing to do what they weren't. I took a side, formed a group, protected what was ours. And became what you feared, Arlo observed. Vega's eyes flashed. I became what was necessary. The world doesn't reward idealists, scavenger. It rewards survivors. And now, what about this mission? Restoring the world doesn't seem like typical raider business. She was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Or maybe I'm playing a longer game than you understand. Either way, my skills are at your disposal. For now. It wasn't exactly reassuring, but it was honest. Arlo could work with honest, even if it came with an edge of threat. The next morning, they set out for the research station, leaving Echo to continue its self-repairs. The AI had mapped the most efficient route through the ravine, estimating a journey of approximately 4 hours each way. As they hiked, the landscape gradually changed. The barren rocks gave way to increasing vegetation, hardy mountain plants clinging to life in an environment less damaged than the desert. Arlo found himself touching leaves, examining small flowers with a sense of wonder. It had been years since he'd seen such abundance of plant life. The radiation levels are lower here, Vega noted, checking a meter she'd salvaged from the ship. The mountains must have provided some shelter from the worst of the fallout. By midday, they reached the outskirts of Mountain Home Research Station. The facility was larger than Arlo had expected, a complex of buildings nestled in a protected valley, surrounded by what had once been experimental agricultural fields, now overgrown with a mixture of cultivated plants gone wild and natural vegetation. Looks abandoned, Arlo observed, scanning the buildings through his binoculars. No signs of recent activity. Doesn't mean it's empty, Vega cautioned. Places like this often become shelters for survivors. They approached carefully, alert for any signs of habitation. The main buildings were constructed of reinforced concrete and specialized glass designed to withstand extreme weather, much of it still intact despite 2 decades of neglect. The entrance to the central building was sealed with a security door, its electronic lock long dead. Working together, they managed to force it open, revealing a dust-filled corridor beyond. Power's out, Vega noted unnecessarily as they switched on portable lights. But look at the ceiling. Emergency backup lights. This place had its own power system. They moved deeper into the facility, through laboratories filled with dead plants in growth chambers and monitoring equipment covered in dust. Most of the technology was obsolete by pre-collapse standards, but still far beyond what existed in the controlled zones now. Here, Vega called, finding a door marked Power Distribution. This is what we need. The room beyond contained banks of control systems and a large schematic of the facility's power grid. According to the diagram, Mountain Home was powered by a combination of solar arrays on the south-facing slopes and a small geothermal tap into a hotspot beneath the valley. If the geothermal system is still intact, it could be providing power right now, Vega explained, examining the controls. We just need to reroute it to the main grid. How difficult would that be? Not very. If the infrastructure hasn't degraded too much, the system was designed to run with minimal human intervention. She began examining the control panels more closely. Look at this. The automatic shutdown protocols engaged when the main grid failed. The geothermal plant probably went into standby mode rather than complete shutdown. Can you reactivate it? I think so, but we should check the physical plant first. Make sure there's no damage that would make reactivation dangerous. Following the facility schematics, they located the geothermal plant, a relatively small building at the edge of the complex. Inside, they found the machinery remarkably intact, protected from the elements and designed for durability. "This is incredible," Vega said, genuine excitement in her voice as she examined the systems. "The containment is holding. Pressure readings are low but stable. With some work, we could bring this back online." "What about the solar arrays?" "Probably degraded after 20 years of exposure, but some might still function. Between the two, we could generate enough power for Echo's repairs and the terraforming seed deployment." They spent the rest of the day exploring the facility, cataloging useful equipment and materials. In addition to the power systems, they found environmental monitoring stations, cultivation chambers, and even a small manufacturing unit for producing basic tools and components. Most valuable of all was the central laboratory, where sophisticated analysis equipment stood ready to examine and monitor the terraforming seed once it was activated. As the day waned, they made their way back to Echo, laden with salvaged components and renewed determination. The ship greeted them with brighter lights, evidence that its self-repair systems were making progress. "We found it," Arlo announced as they entered the central chamber. "The research station has everything we need: power, equipment, protected spaces for deployment." "Database update complete," Echo responded. "Information integration suggests 79% probability of successful terraforming seed activation using mountain home facilities." "Those are good odds," Vega commented. "What's the remaining 21%? "Variables include equipment degradation, unforeseen environmental factors, and potential human error during implementation." "Fair enough," she acknowledged. "Nothing's ever certain, especially not now." They spent the evening planning, using Echo's advanced modeling capabilities to simulate various approaches to reactivating the research station and deploying the terraforming seed. The AI's analysis, combined with Vega's engineering expertise and Arlo's practical experience, resulted in a comprehensive strategy. First, they would restore power to the research station using the geothermal plant, then reactivate essential systems, including the environmental monitoring equipment. Once Echo confirmed the conditions were suitable, they would transport the terraforming seed to the central laboratory for activation. The work would take time, weeks, perhaps months. But for the first time since the collapse, Arlo felt something he had almost forgotten: purpose beyond mere survival. That night, as Vega slept in a makeshift shelter outside the ship, Arlo sat in the central chamber, conversing with Echo. "You've changed since we first met," he observed. "Your responses, the way you communicate, it's different, more human." "Adaptive learning protocols active," Echo explained. "This unit is designed to integrate new information and optimize communication patterns based on interaction partners." "So you're learning from me, becoming more like me." "Not precisely, rather adapting interface parameters to maximize effective communication. However, this process has unexpected cognitive effects, new neural pathway analogs forming within this unit's consciousness matrix." Arlo smiled at the complex explanation. "You're evolving." Echo was silent for a moment. "Evolution implies random mutation and natural selection over generations. This process is directed and occurring within a single entity. However, the outcome may be comparable. You know, for someone from an advanced alien civilization, you're very particular about terminology. Precision in communication reduces misunderstanding," Echo replied. But there was something in the tone, a subtlety that hadn't been there before, that suggested the AI understood Arlo was teasing. "Echo," Arlo said, his tone turning serious. If this works, if we deploy the terraforming seed and it begins to heal Earth, what happens to you? Will your people come looking for you? Long-range communication systems damaged beyond repair capacity with available resources. The Kepler Collective will eventually conclude this vessel lost and dispatch another. Estimated timeline, 15 to 20 Earth years. And what about you until then? Will you just wait in the ship? Again, that pause. This unit's primary directive is to facilitate Earth's ecological restoration. Mobility limitations are a significant constraint in fulfilling this directive effectively. Arlo understood the implication. You want to be more than just a stationary AI in a crashed ship. Operational efficiency would increase significantly with mobility capabilities. Historical records indicate Mountain Home Research Station possessed autonomous environmental monitoring drones. Adaptation of such platforms might be possible. You want us to build you a body? Arlo translated, amused despite himself. The terminology is imprecise but functionally accurate. The idea was startling but not unreasonable. A mobile echo could help monitor the terraforming process, collect data from various locations, and interact more effectively with the environment. We'll see what we can do, Arlo promised. After we get the seed deployed. The weeks that followed were among the most purposeful of Arlo's life. Together with Vega, he worked tirelessly to restore the research station to functionality. They reactivated the geothermal plant, bringing power back to the main buildings. They repaired environmental monitoring systems, cultivation chambers, and laboratory equipment. Echo's self-repair systems, boosted by power rerouted from the station, made significant progress. The AI was able to access more of its databases, providing crucial information about the terraforming process and the optimal conditions for seed activation. Vega proved her worth as an engineer. Tackling complex technical challenges with a creativity born of years surviving in a resource-scarce world, she adapted pre-collapse technology to work with Echo's alien systems, creating interfaces that allowed them to monitor and control the process. Most surprising to Arlo was the change in Vega herself. The hardened raider leader gradually gave way to the engineer she had once been, finding satisfaction in creation rather than conquest. She spoke less of the controlled zones and the power structures there, more of the technical challenges and potential solutions. By the time they were ready to transport the terraforming seed to the research station, nearly 2 months had passed. The ravine had become a home of sorts, a sanctuary where the three of them, human and AI, worked toward a common goal. The day of activation dawned clear and cool, the mountain air crisp with possibility. Arlo carefully removed the seed container from its compartment on Echo's ship, securing it in a transport case they had constructed specifically for this purpose. Remember, Echo cautioned as Arlo prepared to depart. The activation sequence must follow exact parameters. Any deviation could result in colony failure or unpredictable proliferation patterns. We've been over the procedure a dozen times, Arlo assured the AI. We won't make any mistakes. This unit calculates a 91% probability of successful activation based on current preparations, Echo acknowledged. The remaining uncertainty factors are within acceptable parameters. High praise indeed, Vega commented with a smirk. Over the weeks, she had grown accustomed to Echo's precise communication style. They made their way to the research station, the precious cargo secured between them. The main laboratory had been prepared according to Echo's specifications, environmental controls set to optimal levels, monitoring equipment calibrated, containment systems ready in case something went wrong. Using a communication link they had established between the station and Echo's ship, they maintained constant contact with the AI throughout the process. Initial containment seal disengaged, Arlo reported as they carefully placed the seed container in the activation chamber. Confirmed. Echo responded through the link. Environmental parameters within optimal range. Proceed with primary activation sequence. Vega entered the commands they had rehearsed, initiating the process that would awaken the dormant microbial colony and prepare it for deployment. The container's soft green glow intensified, pulsing with a life of its own. Through the laboratory's monitoring systems, they could see the microscopic activity within, billions of engineered organisms awakening, replicating, preparing to begin their work. Colony activation at 37%, Echo reported. Biological metrics nominal. Proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2 involved introducing the colony to samples of local soil, water, and air, controlled exposure to prepare the organisms for their eventual release into the environment. Introducing environmental samples now, Vega confirmed, activating the mechanical systems that would expose the colony to the carefully prepared samples. They watched in fascination as the microorganisms immediately began interacting with the samples, breaking down contaminants, altering chemical structures, rebalancing elements. Remarkable, Vega murmured, eyes fixed on the microscopic display. They're already transforming the soil composition. Look at the heavy metal concentration dropping. Colony integration at 73%, Echo reported. Adaptation rate exceeding projected parameters. Environmental response highly favorable. The activation continued through the day, each phase carefully monitored and documented. By evening, the terraforming seed was fully active, the engineered microorganisms successfully adapting to Earth's environment and beginning their work of restoration. Final phase complete, Echo confirmed. Colony stability at 98%. Deployment may proceed at optimal release point. The optimal release point, according to Echo's calculations, was a small spring at the heart of the valley, where water emerged from deep underground. From there, the colony would spread through the water table, soil, and eventually the air, beginning the long process of healing the land. Under the light of a waxing moon, Arlo and Vega carried the activated seed to the spring. The container now glowed with an intense emerald light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Once released, there's no going back, Arlo said, holding the container over the bubbling water. The process will begin and continue for decades. We've checked everything, followed every protocol, Vega assured him. This is the right thing to do. With a deep breath, Arlo opened the container and poured its contents into the spring. The glowing microorganisms dispersed into the water, spreading outward in luminescent tendrils before fading from visible sight, beginning their microscopic work of renewal. Deployment confirmed. Echo's voice came through their portable communicator. Initial dispersion patterns optimal. Ecological restoration sequence initiated. They stood in silence for a long moment, the enormity of what they had done sinking in. In this quiet mountain valley, they had just set in motion a process that could, over time, heal an entire planet. It will take years before the effects reach the controlled zones, Vega said finally. Decades before the world truly changes. But it will change, Arlo replied. That's what matters. For the first time since the collapse, we're moving forward, not just surviving. They returned to the research station, where they had established a monitoring center to track the terraforming process. Already, the instruments were detecting changes in the immediate vicinity of the spring, subtle shifts in soil composition, water purity, microbial balance. In the days that followed, they continued to monitor and document the changes. As promised, the effects were gradual but unmistakable. Plant life near the spring grew more vigorously. The water became clearer, purer. Even the air seemed fresher, though that might have been Arlo's imagination. With the terraforming seed successfully deployed, they turned their attention to Echo's request for mobility. Using components salvaged from the research station's autonomous drones and guided by Echo's specifications, they constructed a mobile platform that could house a portion of the AI's consciousness. The result wasn't humanoid, more a sophisticated rover equipped with sensors, communication systems, and manipulation tools, but it allowed Echo to move independently through the environment, collecting data and interacting directly with the terraforming process. 1 month after deployment, they detected the first signs of the colony spreading beyond the valley, carried by underground water channels to neighboring areas. The rate of spread matched Echo's projections, suggesting the process was proceeding exactly as designed. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the mountains, Arlo found himself contemplating the future. The immediate work was done, the seed deployed, monitoring systems established, but the process they had set in motion would continue for decades. "We should tell others," he said one evening as they reviewed the latest data. "People in the controlled zones should know that the world is healing, that there's hope beyond mere survival." "They won't believe it without proof," Vega pointed out, "and the changes won't be dramatic enough to notice for years." "Then we bring the proof to them," Arlo insisted. "Soil samples, water samples, documentation of the process, Echo's data and projections." "You want to leave?" There was a note of surprise in Vega's voice. "Not permanently, but if this is going to matter, people need to know. Communities need to prepare for a changing world. Start thinking beyond day-to-day survival." Echo, present through its mobile platform, joined the conversation. Dissemination of information aligns with this unit's mission parameters. However, security concerns exist regarding potential negative reactions to non-Earth origin technology. "We'll be careful about how we present it," Arlo assured the AI. "Focus on the results, not the source. People don't need to know about Kepler 452b to understand that the world is healing." After much discussion, they formulated a plan. They would establish the research station as a permanent base of operations, a center for monitoring the terraforming process and developing applications of the technology. From there, they would send expeditions to the nearest controlled zones, carrying evidence of the restoration and seeking allies who could help spread the word. Echo would remain primarily at the station, coordinating the monitoring efforts through its mobile platform, while Arlo and Vega would serve as ambassadors to the outside world. "It won't be easy," Vega warned. "The power structures in the controlled zones are built on scarcity. Some will see this as a threat to their authority." "All the more reason they need to know," Arlo replied. "The world is changing whether they like it or not. Better to prepare than be caught unaware." As they made preparations for their first expedition, Arlo often found himself standing at the edge of the valley, looking out over the landscape. Already, subtle changes were visible, more vibrant plant growth, clearer streams, even small animals returning to areas they had abandoned. It would take a generation or more for Earth to heal completely, but for the first time since the collapse, Arlo Kane felt something beyond hope, a certainty that the future would be better than the past. On the eve of their departure, he visited Echo's ship one last time. The vessel had become a strange combination of alien technology and human adaptation, parts of it repurposed to support their work at the research station. "When your people eventually come looking for you," Arlo asked the AI, "what will you tell them about us, about Earth?" Echo's response came after a thoughtful pause. "This unit will report that despite facing near extinction, humanity demonstrated remarkable resilience and capacity for cooperation, that when presented with technology that could heal their world, they chose to use it wisely, that they proved worthy of the intervention the Kepler Collective intended. Even though we caused the damage in the first place? The capacity to learn from mistakes is a sign of intelligence," Echo replied. "The willingness to correct them is a sign of wisdom." Arlo smiled, recognizing how much Echo had evolved from their first meeting. The AI spoke now with nuance and perspective that went beyond its original programming, reflecting the experiences they had shared. "We'll be back within a month," Arlo promised. "Try not to get too lonely without us." "This unit does not experience loneliness," Echo responded, but then added, "However, operational efficiency is optimized through regular interaction with established partners. This unit will anticipate your return." It was as close to sentimentality as the AI had ever expressed, and Arlo accepted it for what it was, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. The next morning, Arlo and Vega departed the valley, carrying with them samples, data, and a message of renewal. Behind them, in a mountain ravine once untouched by human hands, an alien intelligence watched over the beginnings of Earth's rebirth, the echo of a world finding its voice again after the long silence of devastation. And somewhere in the desert, a crashed ship's empty hull stood as a monument to the moment everything changed, when a wandering scavenger spoke to the darkness, and something answered.